Okay, let's go. Number 1. The Chambers Under the Sphinx. The Giza Plateau. Cairo, Egypt, 1991. You're Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, and you're pressing seismic equipment against the base of the world's most famous monument. The Sphinx watches the horizon with its ancient stone eyes, while your instruments listen to what lies beneath its paws. And what they're telling you shouldn't be possible. Your sensors are detecting hollow spaces, cavities beneath the limestone bedrock. Not natural fractures, not geological voids regular, enclosed chambers positioned directly beneath the Sphinx's left front paw and along its southern flank. You've spent months analyzing the data. The readings are consistent, repeatable, and deeply inconvenient for everyone who manages this site. This is where the most carefully guarded secret in archaeology begins. Schoch's 1991 seismic survey detected anomalies consistent with chambers approximately 3 to 12 meters beneath the Sphinx enclosure floor. When he published his findings, he also made a second claim that proved even more destabilizing. Based on the weathering pattern on the Sphinx enclosure walls, the monument was far older than official Egyptology admitted. The vertical erosion grooves on those walls are characteristic of heavy, sustained rainfall erosion, not wind erosion. Egypt hasn't experienced the rainfall levels required to produce that weathering since approximately 7000 to 5000 BCE. The Egyptian Old Kingdom, credited with building the Sphinx, dates to around 2500 BCE. That's a minimum 2500-year gap between when the erosion occurred and when the Sphinx was supposedly constructed. Here's where it gets strange. In 1997, a Japanese team from Uesta University conducted independent ground-penetrating radar surveys around the Sphinx. Their equipment confirmed the subsurface anomalies. They identified a cavity beneath the left front paw measuring approximately 9 meters deep and several meters wide. They detected a tunnel running along the southern wall of the enclosure. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, then under the directorship of Zahi Hawass, terminated the Japanese team's research permit within weeks of their presenting the findings. The full data was never permitted to be published with precise coordinates. Hawass called the anomalies insignificant. Natural rock formations, he said. Nothing to investigate. The mainstream explanation is that the enclosure wall weathering is wind erosion, not rainfall. The subsurface anomalies are natural limestone fissures consistent with geological formations throughout the plateau. Ancient texts referencing chambers beneath the Sphinx as a guardian of hidden repositories are metaphorical. Any resemblance between the detected anomalies and descriptions of a hidden hall of records is coincidental. But the geology doesn't support the wind erosion theory. Schoch holds a PhD from Yale and has spent decades studying geological erosion patterns in the field. Dozens of credentialed geologists independently reviewed his weathering analysis after it was published. The vertical profile of the Sphinx enclosure walls matches rainfall erosion in peer-reviewed geological literature. Not fringe websites. Peer-reviewed literature. And there is one more fact that has never been satisfactorily addressed. Before Zahi Hawass became director of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, he completed a doctoral dissertation at the University of Pennsylvania. That dissertation discussed the possibility of chambers beneath the Giza Plateau. Then he became the man with the power to grant or deny access. And the access stopped. In 1996, the Edgar Cayce Foundation funded additional seismic surveys at Giza. Their team identified further anomalies consistent with chambers. Access for a second survey phase was denied before it could begin. In 2009, an international team of archaeologists requested permits to investigate subsurface features around the Sphinx identified in previous remote sensing surveys. The permits were denied without explanation. 5 independent research teams, the same location, the same anomalies, the same denial. What chambers lie beneath the left paw of the world's most ancient mystery? Who built them? And when? And what do they contain? If there is nothing to find beneath the Sphinx, why have 5 independent teams been denied access after detecting anomalies in the exact same position? And why did the man who controls the permits write about those chambers in his own doctoral research before deciding they didn't exist? From Egypt's most recognized icon, we travel to a forgotten hill in southeastern Turkey, to a site so impossibly old that when its discoverer realized what he'd found, the world quietly looked away. Number 2. Göbekli Tepe's deliberate burial, southeastern Turkey, 1994. You're Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist from the German Archaeological Institute. standing on a dry limestone hill called Göbekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill in the foothills of the Taurus Mountains. Kurdish shepherds have been finding carved stones here for decades. A survey from 1963 dismissed the site as a medieval cemetery. You pick up one of the carved stones and turn it over. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. This isn't medieval. Your instruments confirm it. What you've found is approximately 12,000 years old, and it's buried. Not buried by time and sediment the way most ancient sites are gradually covered. Buried deliberately. The same people who built it, based on all available evidence, intentionally filled these massive carved stone enclosures with rubble and earth around 8000 BCE, sealing them underground with precision and clear intention. The site was hidden, on purpose, by its own creators. Here's what shouldn't be possible. Göbekli Tepe is now recognized as the world's oldest known megalithic religious complex. Its T-shaped limestone pillars, some standing 18 feet tall and weighing 20 tons, are carved with extraordinary animal reliefs: foxes, snakes, vultures, scorpions, executed with artistic sophistication that mainstream archaeology didn't previously associate with hunter-gatherer societies. By conventional understanding, complex monumental architecture shouldn't have appeared until after the agricultural revolution enabled settled communities and organized labor, roughly 10,000 to 8,000 BCE. Göbekli Tepe predates that threshold by at least 1,500 years, meaning it was built by people who supposedly hadn't yet developed the social organization required to build it. Of the estimated 20 enclosures that ground-penetrating radar has mapped across the site, approximately 5 have been excavated. 95% remains underground. The Turkish government and the German Archaeological Institute jointly control all excavation access. Certain sections, particularly those where radar surveys identify the largest and deepest enclosures, remain off-limits to independent researchers. In 2017 and 2018, Turkish authorities restricted international archaeological access to the site entirely amid political tensions with Western governments. During that period, findings from newly opened excavation sections were not published in international journals in real time. Access for independent researchers was denied. The access restrictions tightened precisely when excavations approached the largest enclosures. The mainstream explanation is that the burial was ritual, a ceremonial closure performed by the same communities that built the complex, interfering the enclosures as part of their spiritual practice. The ongoing access restrictions reflect responsible stewardship of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The 95% that remains unexcavated is being methodically preserved for future study. But ritual burial doesn't explain the scale. Filling 20 enclosures with rubble required organized, sustained labor equivalent to building them. This wasn't an afternoon ceremony. Modern excavators have confirmed that the fill material is not local topsoil, it was carried in from elsewhere, meaning the concealment was a deliberate, logistically demanding operation, not a symbolic gesture. There is also the question of what the carved symbols mean. Researchers Martin Sweatman and Dimitrios Tsakritsis, publishing in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry in 2017, identified pillar reliefs at Göbekli Tepe as a star chart depicting the sky as it appeared in approximately 10,950 BCE. That date aligns with the Younger Dryas impact event, a period of catastrophic climate disruption that some researchers associate with the collapse of a more advanced prehistoric civilization. Was Göbekli Tepe built by survivors of something catastrophic? Was the deliberate burial meant to preserve the enclosures from whatever came next? And what is in the 95% of the site that no one has been allowed to open? Why do the access restrictions tighten precisely when excavations approach the largest unexcavated enclosures? What is being protected beneath that hill in Turkey? From Turkey's ancient buried mystery, we travel to another site in Egypt where 24 massive granite boxes have sat in a subterranean tunnel for thousands of years, and no one can adequately explain how they got there. Number 3. The Serapeum of Saqqara, Egypt, 1851. Your Auguste Mariette, a French archaeologist, following a clue left by the ancient Greek geographer Strabo, who described a temple approach flanked by sphinxes buried to their necks in desert sand. You've been digging along Strabo's path. The sphinxes are exactly where the ancient text said they'd be. And then, beneath the desert floor, you find the entrance to something that rewrites what you thought was possible in the ancient world. The tunnel descends into the bedrock. When you light your torch and walk the chambers, you see them. 24 massive black granite boxes, each one cut from a single piece of Aswan granite, weighing between 70 and 100 tons. Their lids weigh an additional 27 tons each. The internal surfaces are polished to within a fraction of a millimeter in accuracy that modern granite manufacturers achieve with diamond-tipped precision tools and laser alignment systems. Some lids appear to have been sealed under extraordinary pressure. In most of the boxes, there is nothing inside. This is the Serapeum of Saqqara, and the official explanation for what it is barely holds together. The mainstream explanation is that the Serapeum served as a burial vault for the sacred Apis bulls animals, venerated in ancient Memphis as physical manifestations of the god Tate. When an Apis bull died, it was mummified and interred in one of these granite boxes as part of a state religious ceremony. Egyptologists point to inscriptions on the tunnel walls and objects found in the chambers as evidence. Here's the problem. The tunnels themselves are too small to accommodate the granite boxes. The boxes had to have been placed before the tunnels were constructed around them. Engineer Chris Dunn, who published detailed technical analysis of the Serapeum in the 2010s, measured the internal surface finish of the boxes at less than 0.001 mm variance across their interior walls. Achieving that tolerance using copper chisels and sand abrasive, the tools credited to ancient Egyptian workmen, is not mechanically possible. Dunn's analysis identified patterns consistent with machine rotary cutting processes. That analysis has never been refuted with competing technical argument. It has simply been dismissed by mainstream Egyptologists without engagement with the engineering specifics. The dismissal is institutional rather than technical. Second, the few mummified animal remains found in the Serapeum were discovered in far smaller and simpler burial contexts. The 24 massive granite boxes contain no confirmed animal remains in quantities consistent with a centuries-long Apis bull burial program. Some boxes were empty when opened. Others contain materials that have never been fully publicly documented. Several boxes remain sealed today. Access beyond the tourist areas, including the lower levels where additional chambers are believed to exist, is restricted by the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities. The stated reason for that restriction has never been publicly explained. The Egyptian authorities conducted internal surveys of the lower Serapeum levels in the late 20th century. The results were not released. Independent access requests to verify the lower-level findings have not been approved. Someone moved 70 to 100-ton granite boxes through tunnels too narrow to accommodate them. Polished those boxes to a tolerance that modern precision equipment struggles to match, sealed them, and buried the complex under the desert. Egyptian authorities have controlled access for over 150 years. The sealed boxes remain sealed. The documentation of the lower levels remains classified within the Egyptian Supreme Council. How were boxes weighing 100 tons installed in tunnels too small to receive them? What manufacturing process produces internal surface tolerances of less than 0.001 mm in solid granite? Why do some boxes remain sealed after 150 years of archaeological management? And what do the Egyptian authorities' own surveys of the lower levels show, and why have those results never been published? From Egypt's underground chambers, we cross the Mediterranean to a small island where an even stranger complex was discovered by accident and where 7,000 human bones disappeared under circumstances that have never been fully explained. Number 4. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, Malta, 1902. You're a construction worker excavating the foundation of a new apartment building on the island of Malta, and your pickaxe breaks through limestone into empty space. You lower a lamp through the hole and see carved stone walls descending into darkness. You say nothing to the authorities. The builders continue construction for 2 years, disposing of bones from the cavity below into the sea to keep their discovery secret and their schedule intact. By the time Father Manuel Magri finally reports the find, thousands of bones have already been thrown into the ocean. What was beneath that building had been sealed for approximately 5,000 years. And what remained after 2 years of unauthorized disturbance was still enough to make archaeologists question whether they understood the ancient world at all. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni is a 3-level underground complex carved entirely from limestone, extending roughly 10 meters below the surface, covering about 500 square meters of interconnected chambers and passages. UNESCO estimates between 6,000 and 7,000 human remains were interred here from approximately 4,000 to 2,500 BCE. It was carved by the same culture that built Malta's surface temples, people using tools of stone, bone, and antler, without metal, without wheels, without draft animals. Here's what shouldn't be possible. In 1988, acoustic researchers began documenting the sound properties of the Hypogeum. The main chamber, called the Oracle Room, resonates at a frequency of precisely 111 Hz. This is not an accident of construction. The chamber was carved to create and amplify this specific resonance. At 111 Hz, the human brain produces documented neurological effects: altered states of consciousness, enhanced emotional response, suppression of left hemisphere analytical processing. Ancient shamanic and religious traditions across multiple independent cultures identified this frequency range as associated with trance and prophetic states. The prehistoric people who built the Hypogeum understood resonance physics. They engineered a specific acoustic environment for deliberate neurological effect 5,000 years ago on a Mediterranean island using stone tools. The architecture is not even the strangest part. Among the thousands of remains removed from the Hypogeum, a significant portion showed unusual cranial morphology skulls with enlarged cranial capacity, different structural proportions, and in documented cases, missing sagittal sutures. These were not deformed by head binding, which lengthens a skull without increasing its volume. These were structurally different. They were displayed at the National Museum of Archaeology in Valletta in the early 20th century. Then, at some point in the mid-20th century, they were removed from public display. The Maltese Heritage Authority has provided incomplete answers about their current location. Independent requests to examine these specific remains have been in process for decades without resolution. The mainstream explanation is that the Hypogeum is a sophisticated Neolithic burial site whose builders developed functional resonance architecture through intuitive, generational construction knowledge. The unusual skulls reflect natural genetic variation. Their removal from display was routine curatorial practice, unconnected to their unusual morphology. The 111 Hz resonance emerged organically, rather than by design. But intuitive construction of a precise resonance chamber requires iterative testing, building, listening, adjusting. The Hypogeum is carved from solid rock. You cannot rebuild a stone chamber that doesn't resonate correctly. The 111 Hz frequency is exact, consistent, and present specifically in the Oracle Room, not throughout the complex. This was designed, not discovered by trial and error in a medium that does not allow correction. Today, UNESCO limits access to 80 visitors per day, citing humidity concerns from human breath. Extended research access for acoustic study or skeletal examination requires wait times measured in years. The full documentation of the site's complete skeletal inventory taken before the bones were transferred from display has not been publicly released. Who designed a chamber to produce specific neurological states 5,000 years ago? What happened to the structurally unusual skulls removed from the National Museum of Archaeology? Why has independent scientific access to examine those specific remains been deferred for decades? And who taught the prehistoric people of Malta the principles of architectural acoustics? From Malta's underground mystery, we travel to the other side of the world, to a terraced hill in Indonesia that is reshaping everything we thought we knew about when human civilization began. Number 5. Gunung Padang, West Java, Indonesia, 2011. Yurdani Hilman Natawayaja, a senior geologist with the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, standing at the top of a terraced megalithic hill called Gunung Padang, the Mountain of Light. Local communities have considered this hill sacred for generations. Your core drilling samples have just come back from the laboratory. You're looking at carbon dating results from organic material extracted from deep within the artificial structure, beneath the stone terraces at the surface. The material dates to between 14,000 and 27,000 years ago. That would make Gunung Padang the oldest known man-made structure on Earth, by thousands of years. It would place its construction in the middle of the last ice age, when no civilization was supposed to exist with the organizational capacity for megalithic building. And the Indonesian government's response to your findings was to stop the excavation. Gunung Padang is a stepped mound measuring approximately 150 meters by 25 meters at its base, rising to a plateau at the top. The surface level consists of arranged andesite stone columns, clearly artificial, recognized as such since the Dutch colonial period. But Nataviaja's team wasn't interested in the surface columns tourists photograph. They were interested in what their geophysical surveys showed beneath them. Ground-penetrating radar, seismic tomography, and core drilling revealed that Gunung Padang is not a natural hill with stones on top. It is a multi-layered artificial structure with at least 4 distinct construction phases extending approximately 27 meters below the surface. The deepest layers, dated using carbon isotopes from organic material within the construction matrix, returned ages between 20,000 and 27,000 BCE. Intermediate layers dated to approximately 14,000 to 7,000 BCE. The surface terraces date to roughly 2000 to 1000 BCE, the most recent phase of a project that began during the Ice Age. Here's what shouldn't be possible. The Indonesian Heritage Act was invoked in 2014 to halt the excavation. A cultural heritage committee, responding to pressure from mainstream archaeologists who disputed the deep dating results, ordered Nataviaja's team to cease drilling in the lower layers. The Indonesian president at the time, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, had personally authorized expanded research. That authorization was overridden by the cultural heritage bureaucracy. Access to the deep excavation levels has been restricted since 2014. The mainstream explanation is that the deep dating results reflect carbon migration ancient organic material that seeped into rock cracks over millennia, producing artificially old dates for sediment that was never part of human construction. The geophysical anomalies are natural volcanic formations, not unusual in this region. But carbon migration from surface layers to consistent depths of 27 meters, in quantities large enough to produce repeatable results across multiple independent core samples, requires geological processes incompatible with the site's actual stratigraphy. The organic material wasn't scattered. It was embedded within the construction matrix at each distinct layer exactly as expected from material incorporated during deliberate construction at different time periods. Independent geologists who reviewed the methodology confirmed this, and the excavation was halted before the team could reach the most significant anomaly. Seismic imaging had identified a chamber at approximately 15 meters depth, a void measuring roughly 5 meters by 5 meters. Nataviaja's team was drilling toward it when the Heritage Act was invoked and access was removed. The chamber has not been investigated. Its contents are unknown. A structure built in stages across 25,000 years. A civilization with organizational capacity during the Ice Age when none was supposed to exist. A government that halted its own scientists precisely when their drilling was approaching a detected subsurface chamber. How did an Ice Age-era civilization construct a multi-layered structure extending 27 meters below the surface? What is inside the chamber detected at 15 meters depth? Why did the Indonesian Cultural Heritage Authority halt the excavation precisely when its own scientists were about to reach it? And if the mainstream interpretation is correct, and there's nothing significant below the surface, what would be lost by simply allowing the investigation to continue and proving it? From Indonesia's possibly ancient structure, we travel north to China, where 36 enormous artificial caves were discovered by accident and have no historical explanation whatsoever. Number 6. The Longyou Caves, Zhejiang Province, China. June 19, 1992. You're Wulan Ai, a farmer in the village of Xianbei, and you've wondered for years about the deep ponds on your land. The locals call them Fei Feng, the hills that flew here, because no one knows their origin. The ponds have never been fully sounded. You borrow a water pump and start draining the first one. It takes 17 days. Beneath the water is a cave. Not a natural cave, a carved cave. The walls are covered in uniform chisel marks, arranged in a precise 60-degree parallel pattern. The ceiling angles smoothly at a consistent grade. Stone pillars have been left standing at calculated intervals to support the ceiling, their placement suggesting structural engineering. The cave is enormous, over 1,200 square meters of floor area, rising 30 meters at its highest point. You drain the other ponds. You find 35 more, in a region with no historical record of anyone building them. The 36 Longyou Caves together represent one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds in modern Chinese history. The combined carved volume exceeds 30,000 square meters, an estimated 1 million cubic meters of rock removed entirely by hand. The chisel marks covering every surface are uniform in angle, depth, and spacing across every cave, every wall, every ceiling, every pillar. Each cave shows the same characteristic 60-degree groove pattern without exception. Here's what shouldn't be possible. There is no mention of these caves in any historical record. China maintains one of the world's most continuous and detailed written traditions, extending back at least 3,500 years. The Zhejiang region has been densely populated and documented throughout recorded Chinese history. Large construction projects of the ancient dynasties, the Great Wall, the Grand Canal, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, appear in official chronicles, geographic compilations, local gazetteers, and administrative records. An engineering project requiring millions of man-hours to carve 1 million cubic meters of rock left no trace in any chronicle, no entry in any geographic compilation, no mention in any local legend, no echo in any oral tradition. Not one record, not one reference, not one word. The Chinese State Administration of Cultural Heritage oversees the site. Non-Chinese research institutions have been limited to what data the authorities choose to share. Independent extended investigation has not been permitted. The mainstream explanation is that the caves were quarried during the Qin or Han Panya, roughly 2,200 to 2,000 years ago, and served as storage, fortification, or mausoleum complexes. Records were lost to dynastic upheaval. The uniform chisel marks are consistent with organized imperial labor practices. But the Qin and Han periods generated enormous documentation precisely because the state machinery required to execute large projects produced records at every level. The Great Wall has records. The Grand Canal has records. The tomb of the first emperor has records. Projects requiring millions of man-hours are documented in the Chinese historical Kano tradition because they required the kind of state resources that generated administrative evidence. A project larger than most of those, the carving of 36 caves, totaling 30,000 square meters, left nothing. And there is one more layer. The stone surfaces of the Longyou Caves have been treated with an unidentified waterproofing compound, a treatment that has prevented significant water infiltration for however many millennia the caves have existed. The chemical composition of this compound has not been identified in any publicly available research. The organization that developed it, the period when it was applied, and its precise formulation are unknown. The Chinese authorities who oversee the site have not published analysis of the compound's composition. Who carved 36 caves totaling 1 million cubic meters and removed every trace of that project from a civilization with 3,500 years of unbroken written records? What process produced uniform 60-degree chisel marks consistent across every carved surface in every cave? What waterproofing compound was applied to the stone? When was it applied? And why has its composition never been publicly identified? And how does a civilization capable of this engineering simply vanish from the historical record? From China's undocumented underground labyrinth, we travel to the remote Pacific, to ruins built on artificial islands, using stone that doesn't exist anywhere on the island where it was built. Number 7. Nan Madol, Pohnpei, Micronesia. You're approaching by canoe across the western lagoon, and what rises from the shallow water doesn't belong to the world you know. Stone towers emerge from rectangular platforms, each platform an artificial island built from basalt logs, stacked like enormous timber, each log up to 5 meters long, each one weighing up to 5 tons. The platforms are connected by narrow canals. A Venice of the Pacific, except this one was built without metal tools, without draft animals, without wheeled carts, and without a single natural outcropping of the black basalt you're looking at anywhere on this island. The nearest confirmed source of basalt with matching geological composition is approximately 30 kilometers away, across open ocean. Someone transported an estimated 750,000 metric tons of stone bade across open Pacific water to an island with no natural harbor capable of receiving that cargo, using ocean-going canoes, rope, and human labor. The engineering problem that represents has not been satisfactorily explained, and the builders themselves never claimed to have solved it through conventional means. Nan Madol was the ceremonial and political capital of the Saudeleur dynasty, which ruled Pohnpei from approximately 1200 CE to 1628 CE. The complex consists of roughly 100 artificial islands spread across 2.5 square kilometers of lagoon. UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site in 2016, citing its outstanding universal value. The designation also created a framework that, in practice, limits independent investigation of what lies beneath it. Here's where it gets strange. Modern engineers who have analyzed the transport problem calculate that moving 750,000 metric tons of basalt, even accepting the shorter route from Soke's Rock on Pohnpei's northern tip, approximately 10 kilometers away, required a continuous industrial-scale stone transport operation for the entire duration of the Saudeleur dynasty. No record exists of the logistical infrastructure that would have demanded. But the logistics are not even the strangest part. In the 1990s, acoustic sonar surveys of the lagoon floor at Nan Madol identified anomalies beneath the seafloor. Sediment structural irregularities consistent with built features predating the visible surface construction. The surveys were conducted by research teams working with the Federated States of Micronesia government. Subsequent requests to investigate these subsurface anomalies through excavation or further remote sensing have not been approved by Micronesian authorities, in coordination with UNESCO World Heritage oversight. What exists beneath the lagoon floor at Nan Madol has not been examined in 3 decades. The Saudeleur's own oral traditions reveal the most significant detail of all. Those traditions don't describe construction through organized human labor. They describe the capital being built by twin brothers named Olasipa and Olasopa, who levitated the massive basalt logs into place through supernatural power. The traditions also describe Nan Madol as built over an earlier, submerged city, a place of primordial power that the Saudeleur built upon, not created. The people whose civilization constructed these platforms did not claim to have built them by conventional means. The mainstream explanation is that the Saudeleur accomplished the construction through sustained, organized labor over multiple generations, with stone transported from Soke's Rock. The oral traditions are mythological framing of historical events. The 1990s sonar anomalies are natural geological formations. UNESCO and government oversight reflect responsible preservation. But the builders themselves, absolute rulers with every reason to claim their own achievement, credited the construction of their capital to supernatural power. When a culture describes its own greatest architectural achievement as having required something beyond human capacity, rather than simply claiming skilled labor, that is worth examining. And those lagoon floor anomalies have sat uninvestigated for 30 years. How were 750,000 metric tons of basalt transported across open Pacific water without metal tools or wheeled vehicles? What do the 1990s sonar anomalies beneath the lagoon floor represent? Why have access permits for subsurface investigation been consistently withheld in the 3 decades since those anomalies were first identified? And why do the Saudeleur's own oral traditions acknowledge supernatural power for a construction their dynasty supposedly accomplished through conventional labor? From the Pacific Stone City, we travel to Europe, where a mountain range in Romania became the center of a military operation in 2003 that no government has ever publicly acknowledged or denied. Number 8. The Bucegi Mountains, Romania, 2003. According to accounts published by a Romanian intelligence officer named Radu Sinemar in a series of books beginning in 2009, a classified joint operation between the Romanian Intelligence Service and the United States Defense. Intelligence agency identified an anomaly beneath the Bucegi Plateau using American satellite ground-penetrating technology. The anomaly registered as a massive hollow space approximately 60 meters below the limestone surface. A Romanian military team with American technical support descended through a natural cave system below the plateau and broke through an ancient sealed wall into a chamber that had been closed for an undetermined period of time. What Sinemar claims was found inside that chamber has never been officially acknowledged by any government. The Bucegi Plateau forms the southern arc of the Carpathian Range in central Romania. It includes one of Romania's most recognized natural rock formations, the Bucegi Sphinx, an 8-meter erosion feature that bears an unintentional resemblance to its Egyptian counterpart when viewed from a specific angle. The plateau is a protected natural area. Access to undeveloped sections, particularly areas near and below the natural Sphinx formation, is managed by the Romanian National Parks Authority. Sinemar's account describes a chamber containing technology that could not have been manufactured in any known historical period projection devices displaying holographic records, enormous stone tables with holographic maps of the ancient world, and tunnels connecting through bedrock to sites in Egypt, Tibet, and Iraq. These claims require extraordinary evidence that has not been publicly produced. But here is what is documented without dispute. In 2003, the same year Sinamar identifies as the discovery date, the Romanian government implemented new access restrictions on sections of the Bucegi Plateau near the natural Sphinx formation. Those restrictions were framed as conservation measures. They have been maintained and expanded since. Satellite imagery of the plateau before and after 2003 shows clearing activity in several locations consistent, with access trails cut for heavy equipment, unnecessary for conventional conservation work in a protected natural area. The story has circulated in multiple languages for over 15 years, attributed to a named individual claiming first-hand access to classified Romanian military records. No Romanian government official has confirmed it. No Romanian government official has denied it. The absence of denial is not evidence of truth, but governments routinely deny false claims about their territories. A story claiming the discovery of a significant underground chamber beneath a protected mountain in a country with a functioning government and an active international archaeological community has gone without official denial for 2 decades. In the same period, the access restrictions around that mountain have quietly expanded. Requests by hiking organizations and geological research groups to access specific plateau sections have been processed through bureaucratic channels, producing long delays and selective approvals without stated reasons. The restricted zone around the natural Sphinx formation remains in place. The Bucegi case stands apart from every other site in this investigation. The other 9 sites have documented discoveries made by credentialed scientists, published in peer-reviewed journals, and then suppressed by named authorities through documented institutional mechanisms. The Bucegi case has only an intelligence officer's account, undeniable access restrictions, and 2 decades of official silence. That silence is its own kind of answer. What was detected by American satellite ground-penetrating technology beneath the Bucegi Plateau in 2003? What accounts for the new access restrictions implemented that same year? Why has no Romanian government official addressed Sinamar's specific claims in 15 years even to deny them? And if there is nothing significant beneath those mountains, why does the restricted zone around the natural Sphinx formation remain in place? From Romania's guarded mountains, we travel to the most explicitly sealed ancient burial site in the world, where a Chinese emperor has been waiting underground for over 2,200 years. And where the government that controls his tomb has stated openly that no one will be permitted to enter it. Number 9. The Tomb of Qin Shi Huang, Xi'an, China, 1974. You're a farmer drilling a water well in a dry field in Shaanxi province. Your auger strikes something hard beneath the soil. You dig down and find a human head made of terracotta, painted in vivid colors, not a generic face, but a specific person's features rendered in fired clay. Within weeks, archaeologists will determine you found the outer edge of a burial complex containing over 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, horses, and chariots arranged in battle formation. The standing guard of China's first emperor. The emperor himself is buried in a massive mound 1.5 kilometers to the west. He has been there for 2,200 years. The Chinese government has explicitly stated that no one will be permitted to enter the inner burial chamber. Qin Shi Huang unified China in 221 BCE and ruled until his death in 210 BCE. According to the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, writing roughly 100 years after the emperor's death, the tomb was an engineering marvel. Mercury rivers flowing through a miniature landscape of the empire, automatic crossbow traps triggered by intruders, and a ceiling map of the heavens set with pearls representing stars. Sima Qian estimated that 700,000 workers labored on the tomb for 38 years. Here's what the science has confirmed. Soil samples taken from the burial mound in the 1980s and 1990s showed mercury concentrations between 80 and 100 times normal background levels. That is not contamination. The mercury is concentrated directly above where the inner chamber sits. Seismic surveys conducted by Chinese archaeologists in 2010 and subsequent years mapped the underground structure, a large central chamber approximately 30 meters below the surface, accessed by sealed corridors consistent with Sima Qian's description in every dimension that can be measured from outside. The mercury is there. The chamber is there. Sima Qian was not writing metaphorically. The Chinese State Administration of Cultural Heritage has maintained an explicit policy since the 1970s. The inner tomb will not be excavated until technology exists to adequately preserve its contents. The terracotta army's original vivid paint faded within hours of its first exposure to open air in 1974, demonstrating the real risk. That policy has not been revisited. No specific preservation criteria have ever been published that would, once met, trigger a reevaluation. The prohibition is open-ended. It is tied to no measurable threshold and no stated benchmark. The mainstream explanation accepts the official rationale fully. Preservation concerns are legitimate. The 1974 color loss demonstrated in graphic terms what happens when ancient organic materials meet modern atmospheric conditions without preparation. Waiting for better technology before opening an irreplaceable monument is responsible stewardship, not suppression. The government's open acknowledgement that the tomb exists and contains mercury demonstrates transparency. But modern in situ preservation techniques have advanced substantially since 1974. Archaeological excavations of comparable complexity royal tombs in Egypt. Ancient burial complexes in China's own provinces have successfully preserved organic materials using methods developed over the last 50 years. The Chinese government has issued no updated assessment of what specific capability must be demonstrated before excavation is authorized. No criteria, no timeline, no scheduled review. An open-ended prohibition, with no stated conditions for its removal, is not a preservation policy. There is also the question of what else might be inside. Qin Shi Huang's obsession with immortality was state policy. He dispatched expeditions across the known world seeking the elixir of life. He employed thousands of alchemists for decades. Whatever texts, formulas, and objects those expeditions gathered from the ancient world's far reaches were considered valuable enough to be buried with the man who owned everything. The Mercury rivers are protecting something specific. The sealed chamber contains something specific. What specific preservation threshold must be reached before the prohibition on entering the tomb is reconsidered? What does the first emperor's decades-long quest for immortality mean for what might be stored inside that mercury-saturated chamber? Why has the open-ended nature of the prohibition tied to no stated criteria and subject to no scheduled review never been publicly challenged or explained? And after 50 years of advancing preservation technology since 1974, what exactly remains insufficient? From China's sealed emperor, we return to Egypt, where in 2017, a team of scientists aimed cosmic rays at the world's most studied monument and found a room that nobody knew existed. And then the doors were closed. Number 10. The Great Pyramid's Hidden Void, Giza, Egypt, November 2017. You're part of the Scan Pyramids project, an international scientific collaboration involving researchers from Egypt, France, Japan, and Canada, and you've spent 2 years aiming muon detectors at the Great Pyramid of Giza. Muons are particles produced by cosmic ray collisions high in the upper atmosphere. They penetrate stone the way X-rays penetrate tissue, registering density variations in whatever they pass through. Your detectors have recorded millions of particle trajectories. A supercomputer has processed the data, and a large region of the pyramid's interior is absorbing fewer muons than solid limestone should. There is a void, a large void, one that appears in none of the thousands of years of documentation of the world's most studied structure. Nobody knew it was there. The findings were published in November 2017 in the journal Nature, one of the world's most rigorously peer-reviewed scientific publications, with no history of endorsing fringe archaeology. The void, positioned above the Grand Gallery, measures at minimum 30 meters long and may be as large as the Grand Gallery itself, which runs 47 meters long and stands 8 meters high. The Scan Pyramids team called it the Big Void. They called for further investigation to determine its precise dimensions, purpose, and contents. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities acknowledged the discovery. Then it announced that no excavation or further invasive investigation would be permitted. Here's where it gets strange. The Scan Pyramids project had been authorized by the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities from the beginning and included Egyptian archaeologists as core team members. Muon tomography is entirely non-invasive, no drilling, no probing, no disturbance of any surface. A peer-reviewed discovery of a large undocumented space inside the most studied building in human history, made by a credentialed international team, published in Nature. And the response was to restrict further investigation rather than commission it. Zahi Hawass, the same former director of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, who terminated the Japanese team's permit at the Sphinx in 1997, publicly dismissed the Big Void. He stated it was not significant, likely a construction void of no historical interest. He called for the Scan Pyramids project to be suspended. The mainstream explanation is that the Big Void is an architectural stress-relieving feature. The Great Pyramid already contains several known voids of this type, Davison's Chamber and Wellington's Chamber, which sit above the King's Chamber and distribute the weight of overlying stone. The Big Void, according to this view, is simply a previously unknown example of the same technique. But the dimensions don't match. The known stress-relieving chambers are 60 to 90 centimeters high narrow gaps barely large enough to crawl through. Their structural function depends precisely on that narrowness. Thin horizontal voids distribute compressive load across a large area. The Big Void appears, from the muon data, to be several meters in height. A void of that scale, in that position, does not perform the same structural function as the known chambers. Engineering researchers who published structural analysis in response to the 2017 discovery confirmed that the Big Void's dimensions are inconsistent with the stress relief explanation. The Scan Pyramids team proposed a follow-up investigation using endoscopy, inserting a small camera through a pre-existing crack in the pyramid's masonry, causing zero damage to any stone, simply to look inside the void. The proposal was not approved. Additional muon detector configurations to refine the Big Void's exact shape were proposed. Permits for extended work have not been consistently granted in the years since the Nature publication. The Egyptian government controls access. The Big Void is confirmed by peer-reviewed science, and no one has been allowed to look inside it. 10 sites, 5 continents, the same pattern everywhere. A discovery is made by scientists, geologists, farmers, archaeologists. It points toward something significant beneath the surface, something that doesn't fit the established timeline. And then the access is denied. The permits are revoked, the data is restricted, the excavations are halted, and the investigation ends without explanation. The Sphinx chambers. Göbekli Tepe's buried 95%. The Serapeum's sealed boxes. The Hypogeum's vanished skulls. Gunung Padang's halted drilling. The Longyou Caves with no record of construction. Nan Madol's uninvestigated lagoon floor, the Bucegi Plateau's 2 decades of official silence, the mercury-filled tomb that no government will open, and the Great Pyramid's void confirmed by nature, and still, somehow, closed to the most basic scientific follow-up. The simplest answer is the most uncomfortable one. Someone knows what's down there, and someone has decided you shouldn't. If this investigation left you with more questions than answers, that's exactly the point. Subscribe for more history that doesn't follow the official script. Leave a comment below. Which of these guarded sites would you most want to see opened? And where are you watching from?